Thank you so much for joining us today for this chapter of time-hopping hero Ethan's First Leaps. We truly appreciate you taking the time to read along with us. Just a reminder that the English subtitles for this video are accurate, and YouTube offers some fantastic tools to enhance your learning. If needed, you can use the auto-translate function to view subtitles in your preferred language, Portuguese already provided on screen. You can also slow down the video playback speed if you'd like to listen more carefully. Thanks again for spending your valuable time with us. Enjoy the story. Time-hopping hero, Ethan's First Leaps. Copyright 2025. Chunking to Fluency. Chapter 6. The Long Shadow of Loss. The scene shifted, not in a blur of temporal travel, but in a gradual, observational jump forward, orchestrated by Ethan. The vibrant, hopeful Topeka of Walter's youth faded, replaced by a grittier, more subdued cityscape. The railway yards still hummed, but the optimistic swagger that had defined Walter Tipton was long gone. Weeks turned into months, then years, for Ethan and Billy in their hidden observation. They saw Walter drift, clinging to the edges of society, moving through a haze of alcohol, his once sharp mind dulled, his ambition replaced by a simmering resentment. He took on odd jobs, nothing sustained, a shadow of the man he once was. It was in a small, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Topeka, years after Clarabelle's death, that Walter Tipton met Martha. She was a waitress, quiet and unassuming, with kind, tired eyes that held a hint of resignation. Ethan and Billy watched as Walter, his face etched with premature lines, would come in regularly for coffee, his silence a heavy presence. Martha, ever diligent, would serve him without fuss, a small nod her only acknowledgement. There was no grand romance, no passionate declarations. It was a slow, weary gravitational pull of two solitary souls. Walter, broken and adrift, saw in Martha a quiet harbor, someone who asked no questions, demanded no explanations. Martha, perhaps seeing a flicker of the man Walter could have been, or simply seeking stability in her own life, seemed to accept him for what he was, a silent, troubled man. Their courtship was marked by a profound lack of joy, dominated by Walter's withdrawal. He rarely spoke of his past, especially of Clarabelle. Billy watched, a knot forming in his stomach, realizing that this was the root of his mother's distant knowledge and silence. Martha, through hushed whispers heard from old Topeka families, likely pieced together fragments of the story: the brilliant young man, the sudden, tragic loss, the subsequent downward spiral. But she learned, as many did in those circumstances, that probing only brought forth a flicker of Walter's temper, a deeper retreat into his private abyss. She chose silence, a coping mechanism that allowed them to coexist, but never truly connect. Their marriage, when it happened, was a quiet affair, devoid of celebration, more a practical arrangement than a union of heart. The years that followed painted a bleak picture of family life. Walter's drinking, once a desperate coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. He never fully descended into public drunkenness, maintaining a tenuous grip on functionality, but the alcohol was his constant companion, numbing the persistent ache of Clarabelle's ghost. He worked, but without passion, providing for his family, but offering little else. His temper, brittle and unpredictable, was a direct consequence of his unaddressed pain. He lashed out at small annoyances, at perceived disrespect, at the world that had stolen his future. The warmth, the booming laugh Ethan had seen in Walter's youth was a distant memory. When Billy was born, there was a brief flicker of something softer in Walter's eyes, a fleeting moment of paternal pride. But the joy was quickly overshadowed by the persistent sorrow he carried. He was a presence in Billy's life, but an emotionally absent one, unable to give the love and guidance he himself had never processed after his devastating loss. The frustration, the anger, the unresolved grief that Walter had kept bottled up for so long became the invisible poison that permeated their small home. It wasn't always outright violence, but a constant undercurrent of tension, harsh words, and unpredictable outbursts. Billy grew up flinching, learning to navigate the volatile moods of a father whose deep well of pain remained a terrifying mystery. Ethan watched Billy's face as they observed these scenes from the past. Billy's eyes were wide, filled with a complex blend of recognition, profound sadness, and a growing understanding. He saw his own childhood playing out, but now he saw its roots, its tragic origins. The anger towards his father was still there, but it was now laced with a heartbreaking pity for the young man who had lost everything, and for the broken man he became. The realization that his father's cruelty wasn't born of inherent evil, but from an inability to cope with immense sorrow, was a devastating truth, but also a transformative one. Billy now knew what Ethan had meant. He didn't have to be him. He could choose to break the cycle, armed with the knowledge of where it began. The endless loop of Walter Tipton's broken life, played out across the silent canvas of the past, reached a point of saturation for Billy. He had seen enough. He had seen the radiant Clarabelle, the ambitious young man, the soul-shattering moment of loss, and the slow, agonizing descent into a bitterness that permeated every aspect of his father's subsequent life. He saw the quiet desperation in Martha's eyes, the unaddressed void that had become their family's unspoken truth. The why of his own childhood was laid bare, raw and painful, but finally comprehensible. "Ethan," Billy whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze still fixed on a scene of a lonely, middle-aged Walter nursing a drink in a dimly lit bar. "I think I've seen enough." Ethan nodded, a profound sadness in his own heart, but also a deep sense of purpose fulfilled. This wasn't just information. It was a revelation, a gift of understanding that could hopefully change a future. He gently engaged the temporal relays, pulling them out of the past. The grainy filter dissolved, the muted sounds sharpened, and the familiar hum of the time machine roared to life, engulfing them in a rush of accelerating light before depositing them gently back into the quiet familiarity of Mr. Abernathy's workshop. The scent of dust and old books filled the air, a comforting reality after the visceral emotions of the past. Billy stumbled slightly as he exited the time machine, his legs feeling strangely weak. He didn't speak, didn't look at Ethan, but walked straight to Mr. Abernathy's worn armchair where the old man was stirring from a light doze. Billy sank onto the rug beside the chair, resting his head against the armrest, his shoulders still shaking with silent emotion. Mr. Abernathy, his eyes surprisingly clear, gently reached out a trembling hand and rested it on Billy's head, stroking his hair with a feather-light touch. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply understood. The three of them sat in the quiet of the workshop, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the dusty windows. The only sound, the rhythmic tick-tock of 100 clocks, marking time, past and present, now forever intertwined. For Billy, the world was irrevocably altered. The angry, unpredictable father of his present was no longer just a source of fear or resentment. He was a tragic figure, a man broken by an unspeakable sorrow he had never learned to process. The abuse was still wrong, still painful, but it now carried the crushing weight of its origin. He saw the layers of inherited pain, the legacy of a loss that had echoed through decades, shaping not just Walter, but Martha, and ultimately, himself. This new understanding didn't erase the past, but it offered a chance for a different future. Billy didn't know if he could ever truly forgive his father for the pain inflicted, but he understood the burden Walter carried. For the first time, Billy felt a glimmer of something beyond anger, a deep, aching pity, and perhaps a fragile hope that he, armed with this knowledge, could interrupt the cycle. He didn't have to carry that pain alone anymore. He didn't have to make other people feel what he felt. He had chosen, instead, to understand. And in that profound understanding lay the first, tentative step towards a different kind of healing for the Tipton family. A healing that would begin with Billy. The end of Chapter 6.
Give it a like, will ya?
Frases em bloco de interesse para o capítulo 6. Chunk phrases of interest for Chapter 6. Número 1. Perder-se. Number 1. To drift off. To drift off. Esta frase em bloco se refere ao ato de ser levado lentamente por correntes de ar ou água, ou de se mover sem rumo, sem direção ou propósito. This chunk phrase refers to the act of being carried along slowly by currents of air or water, or to move aimlessly without direction or purpose. Example, Português. Após a tragédia, Walter começou a se perder, perdendo seu senso de propósito. Example, English. After the tragedy, Walter began to drift, losing his sense of purpose. After the tragedy, Walter began to drift, losing his sense of purpose. Número 2. A espiral descendente. Number 2. The downward spiral. The downward spiral. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma situação em que um problema ou situação ruim piora progressivamente, e é difícil de controlar. This chunk phrase refers to a situation in which a problem or bad situation becomes progressively worse and is difficult to control. Example, português. Sua vida entrou em uma espiral descendente após o incidente. Example, English. His life became a downward spiral after the incident. His life became a downward spiral after the incident. Número 3. Mecanismo de enfrentamento. Number 3. A coping mechanism. A coping mechanism. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma estratégia ou comportamento usado por um indivíduo para lidar ou gerenciar emoções difíceis, situações estressantes ou experiências adversas. This chunk phrase refers to a strategy or behavior used by an individual to deal with or manage difficult emotions, stressful situations, or adverse experiences. Example, português. O silêncio se tornou o mecanismo de enfrentamento de Marta no casamento. Example, English. Silence became Martha's coping mechanism in their marriage. Silence became Martha's coping mechanism in their marriage. Número 4. Hábito persistente. Number 4. A stubborn habit. A stubborn habit. Esta frase em bloco se refere a um comportamento persistente e difícil de mudar. This chunk phrase refers to a persistent and hard-to-change behavior. Example, português. A bebida, que inicialmente era um mecanismo de enfrentamento, tornou-se um hábito persistente. Example, English. His drinking, initially a coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. His drinking, initially a coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. Número 5. Seu temperamento imprevisível. Number 5. His unpredictable temper. His unpredictable temper. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma tendência de raiva ou irritabilidade repentina de uma pessoa, que é inconsistente e difícil de prever. This chunk phrase refers to a tendency for a person's anger or irritability to be sudden, inconsistent, and hard to anticipate. Example, português. Billy aprendeu a lidar com o temperamento imprevisível do pai. Example, English. Billy learned to navigate his father's unpredictable temper. Billy learned to navigate his father's unpredictable temper. Número 6. Uma lembrança distante. Number 6. A distant memory. A distant memory. Esta frase em bloco se refere a algo do passado que é vago ou difícil de lembrar claramente. This chunk phrase refers to something from the past that is vague or hard to recall clearly. Example, português. O calor de sua juventude se tornou uma lembrança distante. Example, English. The warmth of his youth became a distant memory. The warmth of his youth became a distant memory. Número 7. A dor não resolvida. Number 7. The unresolved grief. The unresolved grief. Esta frase em bloco se refere à tristeza ou ao luto persistente e não resolvido. This chunk phrase refers to lingering, unaddressed sadness or mourning. Example Português. A dor não resolvida moldou toda a sua vida adulta. Example English. The unresolved grief shaped his entire adult life. The unresolved grief shaped his entire adult life. Número 8. Permear sua casa. Number 8. To permeate his home. To permeate his home. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma expressão figurativa que significa que algo influente se espalhou e afetou cada parte do seu ambiente de vida ou vida familiar. This chunk phrase refers to a figurative expression meaning that something influential spread throughout and affected every part of his living environment or family life. Example: Português. A raiva não expressada era veneno que permeava sua casa. Example: English. The unexpressed anger was a poison that permeated his home. The unexpressed anger was a poison that permeated his home. Número 9. As explosões imprevisíveis. Number 9. The unpredictable outbursts. The unpredictable outbursts. Esta frase em bloco se refere a explosões emocionais repentinas e descontroladas. This chunk phrase refers to sudden, uncontrolled emotional explosions. Example: Português. Billy cresceu se encolhendo diante das explosões imprevisíveis de seu pai. Example: English. Billy grew up flinching from his father's unpredictable outbursts. Billy grew up flinching from his father's unpredictable outbursts. Número 10. Uma incapacidade de lidar. Number 10. An inability to cope. An inability to cope. Esta frase em bloco se refere à falta de habilidade, força ou capacidade emocional para lidar ou gerenciar situações difíceis, estresse ou desafios de forma eficaz. This chunk phrase refers to a lack of skill, strength, or emotional capacity to handle or manage difficult situations, stress, or challenges effectively. Example: Português. Sua crueldade decorreu da incapacidade de lidar com imensa tristeza. Example English. His cruelty stemmed from an inability to cope with immense sorrow. His cruelty stemmed from an inability to cope with immense sorrow. Número 11. O loop infinito. Number 11. The endless loop. The endless loop. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma sequência ou ciclo repetido que parece não ter fim. This chunk phrase refers to a repeated sequence or cycle that seems to have no end. Example: Português. Ele estava preso no loop infinito de seu passado destruído. Example: English. He was stuck in the endless loop of his broken past. He was stuck in the endless loop of his broken past. Número 12. Homem de meia idade. Number 12. A middle-aged man. A middle-aged man. Esta frase em bloco se refere a homem normalmente considerado como estando na faixa etária de 40 a 60 anos. This chunk phrase refers to a man typically considered to be in the age range of 40 to 60 years old. Example: Português. Billy viu homem solitário de meia-idade tomando uma bebida. Example: English. Billy saw a lonely, Middle-aged man nursing a drink. Billy saw a lonely middle-aged man nursing a drink. Número 13. Uma onda de luz. Number 13. A rush of light. A rush of light. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma explosão repentina e rápida de luz. This chunk phrase refers to a sudden and rapid burst of light. Example português. A máquina do tempo os envolveu em uma onda de luz acelerada. Example English. The time machine enveloped them in a rush of accelerating light. The time machine enveloped them in a rush of accelerating light. Número 14. No apoio de braço. Number 14. On the armrest. On the armrest. Esta frase em bloco se refere a uma parte específica de um móvel posicionada onde uma pessoa pode apoiar o braço. This chunk phrase refers to a specific part of a piece of furniture, positioned where a person can rest their arm. Example português. Billy apoiou a cabeça no apoio de braço da cadeira do Sr. Abernathy. Example English. Billy rested his head on the armrest of Mr. Abernathy's chair. Billy rested his head on the armrest of Mr. Abernathy's chair. O fim das frases em bloco de interesse. Para o capítulo 6. The end of chunk phrases of interest for Chapter 6.
We hope that by listening to the story and reviewing the chunk phrases of interest, you've had a chance to increase your English vocabulary in an enjoyable way. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to continue your journey with Ethan and his time-hopping adventures, please subscribe to the Chunking to Fluency channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to share this video with anyone who might enjoy it or is learning English. And don't forget to give it a like. Finally, if you hit the notification bell icon, you'll be sure to know when the next chapter of time-hopping hero Ethan's First Leaps is released. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Be blessed.